Hi, I'm Alex Rashkanu. For the 40th episode of the Career Planning Show, I had the privilege of interviewing Steve Orsini, the President and CEO of the Council of Ontario Universities. The Council provides a forum for Ontario's universities to collaborate and advocate in support of their shared mission to the benefit and prosperity of students, communities, and the province of Ontario. Prior to this role, Steve Orsini held several leadership positions in the Ontario Public Service, including Secretary of the Cabinet, Deputy Minister of Finance and Secretary of the Treasury Board, and Deputy Minister of Revenue. Steve also held several leadership positions at the Ontario Hospital Association, including Vice President of Policy and Public Affairs. Steve Orsini is a member of the Intergovernmental Fiscal Relations Commission, a senior fellow at the CD Howe Institute, a board member of the Ontario Brain Institute, an adjunct professor in the School of Public Policy and Administration at Carleton University, and a distinguished fellow at the Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto. Steve Orsini holds a Bachelor of Applied Arts in Urban and Regional Planning and a Master's in Environmental Studies. Enjoy listening to the interview. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Career Planning Show. Our guest today is Steve Orsini. Steve, how are you today?
Oh, very good. Very good. Thank you for asking.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this podcast episode. I really appreciate it. You've had such a diverse and interesting career. You've definitely gone to the very peak of the Ontario Public Service. You're now the president and CEO of COU, the Council of Ontario Universities. You're involved in so many different important policy decisions. And it's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Would you be able to perhaps take a step back and think about some of the steps that you've taken along your career journey up to the point when you became Secretary of the Cabinet, Clerk of the Executive Council, and Head of the Ontario Public Service?
Oh, sure, Alex, happy to. So I've been very fortunate, lucky, I would say, of having exciting opportunities come my way. And I always said to my kids, find the passion, and then you never have to work again. If you find what you're interested, what drives you, what excites you, it makes work more fun and more fulfilling. And so I've been very lucky. I had a great education. I went to Ryerson in urban and regional planning. And from that gave me theory and practice into an important area of society, urban and regional planning and organizing society as we grow was an important career move. I went to York after that in environmental studies. And what was nice about York University in the Faculty of Environmental Studies, they allowed you to design your own curriculum. And so it allowed me to look at economic planning. So the role of the private sector and the role of the government and how they work together. And so I took courses from economics, business administration, environmental studies to really look at the impact of government working with the private sector. And then I did a co-op term at the Ministry of Finance. At that time, it was Treasury and Economics. And so my thesis at York was economic development. And the branch I was hired for was called economic development. So it was fortuitous. It's kind of the areas I was interested. There's also a part of government very interested in the same thing. And what I found that when you're interested into a topic, when you're enthralled by it, that you make those extra efforts to understand it, to network, to build relationships. So after a couple of years at economic development, I went on to the Ministry of Industry, Trade, and Technology. I did a few months there, and then I was asked to take a role in the Ontario Development Corporation. It's like a government equity and lending arm to support economic development. So again, my background, planning and economic development, kind of suited that work. And then after that, I went on to the Ministry of Finance and the Taxation Policy Branch. So when you think of the role of government, providing services is one thing. Raising revenue to finance public services is another. So I was involved into a lot of different tax policy initiatives. From that, I went on to the Ontario Hospital Association, which was great experience. It was a completely different sector. It was helping to provide support hospitals providing essential services to the public. And it's the hospital experience really gave me a sense of the role of the broader public sector and its role in the economy. And so they're not quite private sector, they're not quite government, they're sort of the nonprofit sector. And the nonprofit sector plays such a vital role. And as we know how important hospitals have been during the pandemic. And then from that, I went back to the Ministry of Finance and I ran the budget process. So as Assistant Deputy Minister of Office of the Budget and Taxation, I had the budget process, which was a huge experience. Try to coordinate all the government's policy into one document is quite a daunting task. And I learned a lot and I had a lot of great mentors. And then from the ADM role, I became an Associate Deputy Minister in the Ministry of Finance. I became Deputy Minister of Revenue and then Deputy Minister of Finance. Now, while I was in finance, I was involved in a lot of major projects that really, to me, made a big difference in the society and the economy. Ontario had its own retail sales tax, and the federal government had their goods and services tax. We had two sets of tax collectors, two sets of books, all completely different set of rules. And one of the things working with the federal government is in 2009, the Ontario government decided to harmonize its retail sales tax with the goods and services tax to create the HST. Now, no one likes taxation, but having two levels of taxes only confuse, add cost to business, made the administration of our tax system more expensive. That was a huge effort from a policy side, from a political side, but it was transformative in reducing cost to business and simplifying it for consumers. Mm-hmm. And then from Deputy Minister of Finance, I went on to Secretary of Cabinet, which is another whole area of experience, learning opportunities, working with all the deputy ministers before they were colleagues. And then as secretary, I was responsible for deputy ministers in supporting the cabinet process. And one of the best parts of the job was dealing with the Ontario Public Service. I had numerous town halls to hear directly from OPSers, as we called them. And I would go to different parts of the province. I'd have town halls. I'd listen to employees talk about their opportunities, the challenges. And I would say one of the most fulfilling parts was dealing with the groups that had to deal with different parts of our employees, our equity groups, whether it's Indigenous, Francophone issues, accessibilities, or I would say, or Black or other racialized groups. And the group I worked probably the most closely with was the Black OPS employees. Evelyn Brown was the head of it. She still is today. And we found common cause in really trying to ensure a more inclusive and diverse OPS. And I'm happy to say that since I've left, each subsequent Secretary of Cabinet has continued in that, spirit. And so I benefited from the previous secretaries of cabinet, and my successors have been really focused on how to create a more inclusive and diverse OPS. So that's a long way of saying how I got to where I was in the Ontario Public Service. And now I'm with the Council of Ontario Universities. I'm dealing with higher education. I'm dealing with communities throughout the province. We're looking at how do we solve societal challenges? How do we ensure we have the skills the economy needs? How do we support local economic development in all regions of the province? So there's a lot of interesting issues, a lot of great people to work with. The organization I have is very collaborative. So I really benefited from a lot of opportunities and working with great people and having great mentors. And so I feel very blessed, given the experience I've had over the years.
That's wonderful. Now, if you were to reflect on what would be your top priorities in your role right now as President and CEO of the Council of Ontario Universities, what would you say sits at the very top? Is it financial sustainability of the university's system across Ontario? Is it specific opportunities that they're being pursued right now? Are there certain things that you would be able to disclose that would be of interest to anyone listening?
Sure. I would say there's three top priorities. There's a lot of issues, but I would bucket them in three. One is student success. We have, in the midst of the pandemic, the Ministry of Colleges and Universities would survey graduates 2 years after they graduate and ask them a number of questions. One question is, were you employed after 6 months? And are you employed now 2 years after you've graduated? And this is in 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, 93% of those they interviewed, and this is an independent research group, does it for the ministry, said that they were employed. 90% said it was related or somewhat related to their fields of study. So one of the things universities are very focused on, how do we ensure student success? And that means we're constantly looking at our programming, how we teach, how we keep up to date with the research, because student success is a priority. And access to education is a priority. Universities in Ontario collectively spend $1.1 billion a year in bursary and scholarships to give qualified students access to higher education. To me, student success is a priority. The second area is financial health and sustainability. As universities constantly evolve and transform, taking on new challenges, new areas of research, new areas of exploration and thought leadership, they need to make sure they're keeping up with the latest equipment in the laboratories, the latest technologies. And so that requires constant investment in supporting students and making sure they have modern buildings and equipment. So that takes money and an effort. And so that's an area that we're constantly looking at, ensuring the financial health of the system. And the system's very robust, but it does have to be focused on how best to ensure that we're delivering a high quality product. So quality is paramount. You want students to come out of the system very well educated, job ready. And so that takes time and effort. The third area is ensuring institutional autonomy, allowing institutions to customize their programming to meet the needs of their students and community. You have universities that are ranked in the top 18 globally, and other ones that play a vital role in the local communities. And so there's not a cookie cutter approach. And each of them have boards of governors that are focused on good governance and ensuring they meet the needs of their communities. And so you don't want a cookie cutter approach. You want each institution to adjust what they're doing to meet the needs of their students, communities, and the economy. And that allows academic independence to pursue research in questions that people don't normally ask. You want researchers to be pursuing issues that are vital to the society that people may not be asking. 20 years ago, people were investing in public health. They were investing in training and building up our public health expertise. And then the pandemic came along, and we had this body of expertise and knowledge. Other people are now working on climate change, and we're developing excellent expertise in the impact of climate change, how to adapt to climate change, and how to mitigate it with technology and new ways of doing things. And we're supporting a lot. We're supporting a lot of what the government's doing in terms of electrical vehicles, what we're doing on advanced manufacturing, of what we're doing on a whole array of different things to meet the needs of the economy. And so I think from my perspective, we're working in partnership with other community stakeholders. We're working in partnership with the government to really ensure that Ontario can compete globally in the years to come.
Okay. Thank you so much for diving into that. I do know that you have your hands full with a couple of other things that sit on the side of your desk at times. Initiatives like serving on the steering committee at the Intergovernmental Fiscal Relations Commission. You're also a senior fellow at the City Howe Institute. You're a distinguished fellow at the University of Toronto Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. Are there one or two initiatives that you're involved with right now or that you were involved with recently across these three other aspects of your professional career that you'd be willing to talk about?
Sure. For those policy geeks that might be listening, the Intergovernmental Fiscal Relations Commission is a very interesting one, because you hear a lot between the federal government and the provinces talking about fiscal transfers. So we are looking at, launching a paper that looks at all the issues that both orders of government and need to consider, whether it's healthcare funding, equalization, stabilization, infrastructure funding, the list goes on. And the question is, how do intergovernment relations change as a result of the pandemic? Is it the status quo? Are there new relationships that need to develop? What's the role of municipalities? As we've seen, a lot of services are delivered at the local level, but municipalities are not playing a role in the negotiations at the federal provincial level. So the question is, how do you get the voice of municipalities into these discussions? How do you prioritize? And how do you modernize different funding formulas? So it gets technical very quickly, but it's so important to our federation. Canada has one of the most decentralized federal systems in the world, and that's given us some huge advantage, innovation. Saskatchewan, Tommy Douglas, with public health care, helped to evolve us into new areas. Other provinces, more recently, are devising new ways to support, the disadvantaged, to grow the economy. And the federal government's evolving too, and they're playing a role in a very significant way in dealing with the pandemic. So these relationships change. There's regional tensions that exist from time to time. And so that's one area that I find is very interesting. And we got great economists on the commission. I'm more of the practitioner that's been involved in government in dealing with these funding formulas. But, we got, people from the University of Calgary, University of Toronto, Gill, and other parts that are top-notch researchers and economists that really provide the analytical might to a lot of the discussions we're having. And so that's been a very interesting area. CD Howe plays a very important role as an independent think tank in Canada. And I have had the pleasure to review some papers, to chair some working groups. So CD Howe has been a great opportunity for me to get more immersed in sort of leading public policy issues. And as an independent think tank, they bring a lot of intellectual capital to all discussions they engage in. The Monk School is quite an expert group of professors and fellows really looking at public policy. But I've had the opportunity to work with other public policy schools at Carleton and elsewhere. And I find that these different schools, whether it's in different areas of the economy, are vital because they're constantly looking at how we can improve things. What are the issues we need to understand and how do we tackle them? And that's that thought leadership that's important to how we operate it as a society. So I really feel lucky to be part of these very, sophisticated, knowledgeable groups tackling very complex issues.
Thank you so much for sharing that. If you were to think about the public policy areas that you've been deeply focused on, whether it has to do with fiscal policy, education policy, most recently, healthcare policy, revenue, is there one particular initiative that you've been part of that you think very fondly of it? It's perhaps the one thing that you take away and you think, wow, like I've been able to do that one thing. I am so glad that one thing was part of my career. Is there something that comes to mind as one initiative that you worked on that you're really proud of?
So there's a number of policy issues I can talk about that I reflect fondly on. Sales tax harmonization, tough. Eliminating the previous OHIP premium that really put it was regressive and put a heavy burden on low-income families. There's other policy issues that we had to tackle, but the one that I would say is the most meaningful for me, and it's probably the most challenging one to have tackled, is really building a strong partnership with our Black OPSers. When you look at people who have been successful, some will say there's white privilege. I think me being born as a male, a white individual in Canada, there was some natural advantages that really come to people in our positions. And we have to recognize that. If we don't recognize that we've had some privileges or advantages, you can't fix it. And so one of my first meetings early in my mandate as Secretary of Cabinet was meeting with the Black OPSers. They call themselves Bobsters, but it's the acronym of Black OPS Employees Network. And they came in and they didn't lecture me. I know they're thinking, here's another white male that we have to convince that we have some challenges. And they looked around the room, and there's pictures of all, you go through the legislature, you go through the building, and there's pictures of white men in the hallways. And so everything, this is just creating the wrong culture to have a conversation. But they came in and they sat down with me, and they basically told me their lived experiences. And I tell you, it was emotional for me. It was, heartbreaking, and they did it with very, they didn't use over the top language. They just described their lived experience. And to me, that created deep empathy. And I think if it changes you as a person, it changes how you look at issues. And I think it just makes you as a better individual, a better professional. And it changed my priorities as Secretary of Cabinet to really focus on diversity and inclusion.
Mm.
And it's because of that initial meeting, they didn't ask for anything at that meeting. They just wanted me to know their lived experience. And when I look at the talent of the Black OPS employees and Indigenous and Southeast Asian network, the Tamil group, when you just look at all these different groups, you realize there's a vast amount of talent that needs some nurturing, some mentoring, some championing, but they're there. Accessibility, you hear stories of what they have to go through, but they're dedicated, hardworking. They just need to be accommodated. French language. When you hear their stories, their lived experiences, it changes how you look at things. And I think as a society, we can do a lot better by really appreciating, understanding that lived experience. And so I met Evelyn Brown, head of the Black OPS Employees Network, years after I left government. And we're still working and talking, because you don't end those relationships when you leave the job. They carry with you. And it's helped me in my current role to create an equity, diversity, inclusion working group that the universities are tackling. There's a lot of issues that transcend society. It's not just within the university sector. It starts in junior kindergarten and it goes through their entire lives. And the sooner we can, share these experience, these lived experience, I think the better society will have. So to me, I have to say, of all the other things that we able to get done, to me, the most meaningful was to make those connections with those groups in the OPS, and the way to make the OPS a better workplace.
That's great. Well, I do think that that's an important issue, and I'm glad that you've been working on it and you continue to do so. This has been inspiring. I really appreciate you having taken the time to speak with us. Steve Orsini, President and CEO of the Council of Ontario Universities. How can someone who's listening to our conversation right now get in touch with you in case they have any questions?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. I often reach out to people out of the blue and just, connect with them. And what I like, there's also Twitter and there's other social media, but it's a good way to build networks. And I would say one of the things, if I have a minute, that really struck me, you read a lot of books about leadership, but in the 1990s, or maybe the late 1990s, I came across a book. It had the 11 commandments for enthusiastic teams. And the 11 commandments have stuck with me. And I mean, I've read all the leadership books and all that, but it talks about helping each other be right, not wrong.
Mm.
So if you're in a meeting and someone says three things, and one of them might be factually off, the date might be off, or maybe it didn't capture something accurately, are you more apt to try to correct what was said or highlight the two things that were totally dead on, that were great ideas? And so you want to be able to, in meetings, be able to build synergies on teams. And so I found that trying to make people right, not wrong, even if it's done in an honest, thoughtful way, is really to highlight, the things they got right. Now, if they're operating on a wrong assumption, you want to correct that too. But it's really trying to make people right, not wrong. And the other one is to look for, especially in brainstorming nowadays, look for ways to make new ideas work. A lot of times you're faced with big challenges, and you bring people together to try to solve it. And so you want to start, if someone's brainstorming an idea, you want to build on those ideas. You don't know where it's going to go. I remember having a meeting, we had a big issue, no one had a solution. But someone said something, and someone said, I like that part. What if we did this? What if we did that? And then by the end of that meeting, we walked there with a fantastic solution. Looking for ways to make new ideas work, not for reasons they don't work. That is the second, what they call commands, but principles, I would say, of how to create enthusiastic teams. Many times you're in a meeting and you don't have any, so you have a problem, you don't know how to solve it. And so someone will say something and then say, okay, well, that's not a bad idea. And then you add to it. And someone else would suggest something. We've had many situations where we bring a group of people together, and we have a problem we haven't been able to solve. And then through brainstorming, you can come up with a very workable solution when you bring the right people together with different perspectives, different levels in the organization, different expertise. And when you brainstorm, it's amazing what you can accomplish. So I won't go through all the 11 commandments for enthusiastic teams. They're all, from my perspective, they stuck with me over the years because they resonated.
Yeah.
I like the one that, act with initiative and courage, as if it all depends on you.
Mm.
When we harmonized with the federal goods and service tax in Ontario and created the harmonized sales tax, everyone in the organization played a vital role. From people, the administration assistants that had to organize meetings with stakeholders that were coming in left, right, and center with, this is going to affect us. Can you mitigate this? I don't understand this. How does this work? They played a vital role. Communications, policy analysts, data experts, the senior leaders in supporting and communicating, the government, the elected officials, everyone played a vital role. And everyone did it. If the world kind of, without them, it wouldn't be successful. So you need that passion and drive.
Mm.
But one of the, number 9, is not the last one, but it's one that resonates with me. Whatever you want, give it away. And that means that if you have information and you go, this is important information, people might withhold it, not share it. If you want to get, recognition for it, or you want to have, full responsibility for something, the more you want to own it, the theory is the more you should give it away. And I found that, when you shared information, you got information back.
Mm-hmm.
When you help someone out with new ideas, they would help you out and give you feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Many times I would reach out to bounce an idea off someone, and it's not because I didn't know, I didn't understand, is that I gain more by giving stuff away, by receiving more back. And so all these different principles for enthusiastic teams
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuck with me over the years. And there's others. I'm not saying these are the only ones. I'm just saying these are the ones that kind of resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the concept of enthusiastic teams driving forward on solutions
Mm-hmm.
that kind of helps, you deal with very intractable issues and challenges.
Yes, you do, and yes, you have, and having a sense of the some of the principles that you think are helpful in dealing with these challenges is actually very interesting, and I appreciate you diving into them. Thank you so much. Thank you, Steve Orsini, for taking the time to be part of this episode of the Career Planning Show. It's been a privilege, it's been a joy having the time to be with you and learn from you and dive into some of the work that you are doing and some of the career development, the reflections that you have that could be helpful to those listening. Thank you.
Alex, thank you very much. I enjoyed it and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Career Planning Show. Visit rascanu.com, that's RASCANU.com, to subscribe to my free newsletter, find free events that you can attend in the Toronto area, and to connect with me, Alex Rascanu.